George in Dunmore. How are you?
I'm good. Hello, Matt and Tracie. I want to start off by saying I think it is horrendously absurd to compare religion to child abuse. I do not abuse the children who I am teaching religion to. I am enlightening them, broadening their mind.
George?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I don't necessarily equate religious teaching to child abuse.
Well, I sat here and listened to rambling on for about 20 minutes about indoctrination.
Okay, George,
Yes.
let's be clear. I have on occasion said that some religious teaching, some religious instruction should be viewed as a form of child abuse. I do not equate religious teaching with child abuse. And Tracie wasn't necessarily talking about religious teaching at all. She was talking about an actual distinction between indoctrination and socialization that applies beyond religion. And if all you're going to do is come in butthurt and saying that you listen to her ramble for 20 minutes, we're probably not going to have a very productive call.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, sir, but that's the way I interpreted that.
Well,
that's not what I said, though.
Is it still the way you interpret it?
Well, as long as you make yourself clear now, then it's fine.
Well,
people hear what they want to hear, I think, sometimes.
So anyway, what else?
Well, the reason I called in was because on this show I've noticed the hosts never stop talking about how there is no evidence of God in this world.
Well, no good evidence.
I have a list here of evidence that I can give you other than the Bible.
Yeah, I would clarify to say that there's no good evidence, or there is not sufficient evidence.
There is, in fact, sufficient evidence.
It is false to say that there's no evidence, because when people are talking about anecdotal evidence and things like that, of course there are testimonies. And
I've heard many times the host of this show say that there is no evidence.
I understand that, George. I am trying to clarify this for you so that you understand that, yes, in the past there have been mistakes made by me and by others where, in the context of the discussion, we say, there's no evidence for the existence of God. And what we mean and what we should be saying is that there is not sufficient evidence for the existence of God, or that there is no good evidence for the existence of God from our point of view.
Well, I have to disagree with you, sir.
Here's best evidence.
I have a list here of evidence I could give you that I'm sure that you cannot deny.
Can you give us the best one?
That there is a God.
Can you give us the best one?
Yes, sir. The miracle of the sun.
The miracle of the sun?
The miracle of the sun, sir. When the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared in Fatima in 1917 to the three children, one of them being Lucia dos Santos, who lived out her days until 2005. So this is not a witness from thousands and thousands of years ago. This is a woman who, up until a few years ago, was still alive.
Okay.
But tell the tale.
Go ahead.
Yeah. George, is this the same one where they said the sun was moving all over the place?
There were at least 30,000 people that witnessed it, Adam.
Yeah, that's not really substantiated. I've looked this up before.
Yeah, the newspaper article.
Yeah, I know. It was some reporting that was done, and reporting is never wrong. But
before the expanded size of the crowd.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that you can look up.
George, are you going to listen or talk?
You can look up assessments of this.
Incredible movements out.
George, listen to Tracie for a second.
You can actually look up rebuttal. Let's just put it on hold for a second. You can look up rebuttals to this for the viewers.
He just keeps talking, so he doesn't know you're talking.
For the viewers that are watching, you can go and look this up. There are rebuttals to it. The information is not as solid as you might think by the people that claim it. Now, that being said, I was trying to confirm with George, because I don't have the information right in front of me, whether or not this was the miracle where they claimed that the sun was moving all over the sky. And if that is in fact the case, I would like to know how the Earth didn't go flying out of its orbit.
Oh, is he? You there, George?
Yeah. The Earth did not go flying out of its orbit because it was a miracle which was being controlled by God. And God prevented that from happening.
So the sun, this is the one where they said the sun was just going all over the place, but nobody else saw it, right? Like it wasn't reported anywhere else in the world where the sun was showing at that time. Is that correct?
Yes, well, it's a miracle.
Yeah, it could also be an incorrect report.
By 30,000 plus people?
It wasn't that many people. You need to go and look and see how valid these sources are.
So here's the thing. First of all, we have no way of actually investigating this. And we don't know how. Can I finish, George? Can I finish for real? For realsies, can I talk?
There are witnesses.
George. George.
There's no verification to these claims. We've done this before. There were no observatories that reported that the sun moved from its place in the sky. There was no other reports from any other place where it was daytime at the time saying that the sun had moved. There is nothing to substantiate that what these people claimed they saw really occurred. Nothing to verify it. It's just their claim.
And moreover, the point that I was trying to get to is that we have a report of something happening. Even if those people are honest and this is what they apparently saw, we have no demonstration that A, it actually happened, or B, that it was supernatural in origin. Maybe there was some sort of atmospheric phenomenon that caused an illusion.
No,
but would you better let me finish. I swear to your God, George, I'll hang up on you if you don't let me finish. The other thing is, you have no justification for claiming that the cause of this event, even if it occurred, is a God. You cannot claim that without evidence by...
Yeah, and I just want to correct one thing. I do think that we can verify that it did not happen. Now, what you were saying...
Well, we can't verify that people didn't experience it.
Right, and that was something I wanted to make sure, because there was something you said that kind of crossed that line, and I just want to make sure that it was clear to the viewers, because there is absolutely, there are people that would have, everybody in the daytime part of the globe at that point would have reported this. It would have been reports from everywhere if the sun had actually moved. So we know that objectively speaking, externally from the perspective of what did the sun do that day, it did not move. Now, if these people said they saw it, I don't know how valid the reports are, because when you try to look it up and you try to really substantiate this, you really can't get any valid reporting out of it. It's like this little tiny area in Mexico where somebody went and spoke to some people, and all it is, it's like claims from the Bible. It's just going and talking to people, and they're saying, oh yeah, and my cousin George was there, and so you end up with these relayed secondhand accounts that end up getting reported, and then you get these conflicting reports, and it's a mess. But the fact is, if the sun was moving around, it would have wreaked havoc on the planet. Observatories would have reported it, and there would have been more than just one little town in some city in Mexico that would have seen the sun flying all over the sky. We can absolutely, say that whatever they think they saw or didn't see, if they're telling any kind of truth out of there, that we know that in fact what they think they saw did not occur. And as Matt was saying, even if something did occur, there's no substantiation there that it was produced by a deity.
Yeah, and so if we already know that the sun wasn't actually moving around all over the place, then what we're in a position of, somebody is telling us that a bunch of people reported that this thing happened, which we know didn't happen.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean they're all lying, which is the point I was getting at. They could all have thought they saw something, and there could be any number of potential natural explanations, and there could also be supernatural causes. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And so I'm in a position where I need to investigate and say, okay, can we demonstrate that some phenomena occurred? Well, actually, no, not really. We have a report, and yes, it's a lot of people, but that's an appeal to popularity. And, I can't point to any others with 30,000, but you can go find groups of people who claim to have been abducted by aliens together. That doesn't mean they actually were. By the way, these people are still alive, and they'll tell you their story. You can talk to them right now. So we can't demonstrate that a phenomenon actually occurred, which means we can't even begin to investigate to find out what the potential cause is. What we can do is speculate about what sort of natural causes are more likely. This is something I'm going to talk about next week at the North Texas Secular Student Conference, when I talk about skepticism, the nature of evidence, critical thinking, and doing some magic and mentalism as well, is in order to determine whether or not what explanations are most probable, you have to have some way of determining the probability of a particular explanation. And so if you roll a die, there's 6 faces. It's a 1 in 6 probability that any particular side is going to come up. If you have 100 claims of answered prayer, we know, we have evidence that some of those claims of answered prayer are answered by natural explanations, or natural explanations are such that they're perceived to be answered prayer. And then there's a bunch of them that we don't know. We have 0 confirmed accounts of a supernatural being actually answering prayer. So when you're calculating the probability, it is always more probable that there's a naturalistic explanation that you don't know than that a God did it. And when you're talking about reports like this, where we are far removed from the events and the people, we don't have a time machine, we can't go back. And we know, as Tracie pointed out, that the actual claim, the sun moved around, that part is false. Actually, what they should have said is, from our point of view, it appeared that the sun moved around all over. Well, I can't do anything to prove that they didn't experience that, but I also can't explain it. And that's the point. Neither can you. Neither can the people who are claiming that this was a miracle from God. They have no justification for that.
And I do want to say, please, please be wary when somebody hands you reports of supernatural phenomenon that come out of like third world areas, small villages. There's no way to confirm this stuff. I mean, people end up going there, they'll report something. I think I gave last time I was on, I talked about anthropologists reporting about exorcism, and how when you read the report, it's almost astounding what you read, but then when you see the video, you're just like, there's nothing, I don't see this. I don't see what they're reporting that they saw. So people get taken up with, a situation and think they see things sometimes they don't actually see. And the more people you have sort of enforcing that around you, and the more attention that you give to people who claim they saw it, the more positive attention you get for telling a fib. I mean, that's just like the boy who cried wolf. If you keep giving somebody positive attention for lying, or for saying, yeah, I saw it too, come talk to me, come interview me. It happens.
Yeah, there's a couple of emails that have come in recently where people have relayed things to me. And one of them is they'd send me to a video of some supposed God healer guy who's doing miraculous healings and causing the blind to see, or doing the limb lengthening, which if you go to camera, the one shot real quick, it's roughly the equivalent of this. You see that? How now that arm's a lot longer. I can fix it by pulling this one out. I mean, that's really the type of thing that people are talking about as miraculous healings. And we already know that a lot of these people are faking. But somebody else wrote in the other day I find it interesting that George's best evidence is this sketchy report. And the reason I think that he's convinced of it is because there's a number attached to it. Because 30 to 100,000 people reported this.
But the rebuttals are all over the internet for this. I mean, just go and look it up if you have any doubt about the questions that surround this miracle.
That's what he cited as his best evidence. Another individual sent me an email in this past week talking about the miracles that he's witnessed, including people rising from the dead. Now, that was his first claim. He had witnessed the dead returning to life. And I was tempted to go on and explain that, okay, I want specifics, and for example, we don't know that much about defining death. It's not necessarily a point, but a process. But he comes back and he tells me the story. I would say stop me if you've heard this, but everybody would stop me right off the bat. About a young kid who's out on a boat on a lake, who falls overboard and is underwater for about 17 minutes or so, and the doctors say that he's not going to revive, and if he does, he's going to have brain damage. And lo and behold, somebody prays, and the kid recovers. And he sends me this, and I replied and said, okay, these reports, while not everyday occurrences, happen a lot, and we've actually done some happen enough that we've investigated this, and we've understand about the mammalian diving reflex, and the reaction to, in particular, cold water amplifies this, such that your body will shut down. And kids, the suspicion is that this is because of features that are built into us in utero, because you're basically in a sack of fluid, and that kids are more likely to survive in this circumstance than adult. And I'm pointing to all this stuff in order to say that maybe this was a miracle, maybe it wasn't, but we have this naturalistic explanation for it, which we see over and over and seems reasonable. And I send that off, and he comes back with, well, no, the water wasn't cold. I didn't say it had to be. Right. That's not a requirement. I'm just saying it works better in that situation. And by the way, 2 weeks later, this little boy comes up to his mommy and tells him that Jesus and some angels took him to heaven. How could he know that? How could he? 4-year-olds can't understand life and death that way. Let me tell you something. If you're a 4-year-old in a household of people who think that you've just been saved by a miracle, I'd be dumbfounded if within 2 weeks you weren't claiming that Jesus and the angels took you up there. Kids are little sponges, and they're after their parents and family members' attention and approval. And if the people in the family, and don't tell me that they weren't, are running around talking about how Jesus saved their son from a drowning death, yes. And you think it's a miracle that 2 weeks later he finally catches on, I'm surprised he wasn't doing it in 2 days, and talks about how Jesus saved. None of this is miraculous. All of this is mundane. Now, the being underwater for 17 minutes and recovering is not normal, everyday happenstance, right. But it's not in the realm of the miraculous. But it's way more miraculous than second and third hand reports of 30,000 people who supposedly saw something that looked like the sun moving around. I mean, come on now. What about that? I'm convinced that the thing that was convincing about that was the number. All these people couldn't be wrong. Yes, they could.
Yeah, it's always that. And the thing is, there is no way to verify that, the number of people that reported it or the number of people who were being accurate. Again, it was like this, it's a tiny piece of dirt in Mexico somewhere. It was like a little tiny town. We're not talking about a metropolis. This isn't like it happened in New York and was captured on ABC, from their cameras. It wasn't like that. That's not the kind of verification that you're going to find when you start trying to figure out what was actually reported. And
when that happens, by the way, when it does happen in New York and it's captured, we'll have a lot better information to actually investigate, figure out what happened, if anything, and whether or not we can.
Yeah, you won't just have hearsay of someone saying, it's about 30,000 people claiming this, and I'm telling you this, and how did you count that number? How did you?